The creature made its move. With a loud shriek, it threw itself against the panel next to the bolts Muldoon had loosened, ripping the door from its hinges and knocking the cage back, sending Joffrey crashing to the unforgiving jungle floor below and jarring every bone in his body. Howling in triumph, the creature shot out a brown, scaly limb and sunk a vicious, saber-like claw into the workman's fleshy ankle, tearing through the muscle and bone and locking itself firmly in place. Joffrey screamed at the top of his lungs as he was dragged forcefully back inside the cage, powerless to resist the creature's superior strength. Muldoon suppressed an excited grin as he immediately began to shout instructions to the panic-stricken construction crew. "Tasers! Get them in there, damn it! You there!" He motioned to one dumbstruck engineer. "Bring me 4 tranq rifles, a vial of nerve toxin, and a camera, goddammit! And make sure it's a bloody video camera this time." Joffrey howled in terror as his efforts to stay put failed. Unable to break the creature's hold, he cracked his head brutally against the side of the cage and lost all ability to resist as his senses became groggy. A rank odor of decaying meat and feces lined the air of the cage. Sissy? And it was all he could do to suppress his gag reflex the way his gym teacher had taught him.
No.
And his head cleared slightly as he was able to make out the dreadful beast which had just snared him. Standing almost 8 feet high, with mottled brown and green skin and rows of curved, serrated teeth, was Velociraptor Antiropus, a killing machine of almost unsurpassed intelligence, lethality, and sexual appetite. Its long forearms ended in 5 muscular digits, each sporting an intimidating-looking claw. It leered at him wickedly, and Joffrey knew his end was nigh. Strangely enough, though, he didn't really mind. Oh, nice. While Joffrey would have preferred not to die, this prehistoric Jack the Ripper was somehow the most beautiful creature he had ever seen, from her lustrous amber eyes to her graceful, prehensile tail, all the way to her muscular thighs and smooth, curvy foot claws.
Oh, yeah.
It would be an honor to be ravaged by such a goddess. Blissfully, and with complete disregard for his mutilated ankle and gashed open head, he reached out and smiled at the creature as she reared up and opened her jaws. By now, the activity outside the cage had reached pandemonium status. Frightened workers ran around like headless compies, trying to find a way to secure the cage and free their colleague. In a state of calm bliss, Muldoon strode over to the radio and casually informed the Jurassic Park Control Center that they were ready for the other raptors now. And also, while they were at it, perhaps a few crates of strong alcohol and some women's clothing. Almost trembling with anticipation, but remaining outwardly stoic nonetheless, he loosened his belt and struck a match to light his pre-coital cigarette with. 6 damn months.
It was a Newport.
It's been 6 damn months since he had a fucking Newport. Well, now he was going to get some release. Grabbing the side of the broken cage, he hauled himself up and peeked through a gap in the roof to see how things were progressing. The Velociraptor had parted her jaws and looked about to strike, but suddenly she seemed to stop as if unsure of herself. Joffrey was confused. Why hadn't this hot Cretaceous babe mauled him like the filthy descendant of a wretched shrew-like thing that he was? There's an episode title in there somewhere. Why was he not being lovingly absorbed by the digestive system of this perfect, carrion-scented Aphrodite? Almost as if he dared not speculate, he glanced up at her, still expecting the final strike that would end his sexually confused mammalian existence, and saw at once that it would not come. Her eyes were still marked by a ferocious hunger, but it was not for shredded meat she seemed to savor. Slaver? That's not a word. She clearly, maybe it is a word. It says slaver. But it's not, I mean, maybe, it doesn't matter. I don't care. She clearly wanted the meat intact. Joffrey couldn't believe his luck. Slowly, she backed away from him, then coyly turned around so her bird-like hips were on full display mere inches from his face. From this angle, he could see her smooth, hairless slit. As he began to drool, she started to shake her hips from side to side seductively, delicately spraying him with gallons upon gallons of dinosaur sex pheromones she had in some gland that all velociraptors had, but that didn't get fossilized with the rest of them because it was too soft somehow. Convenient. Cautiously at first, lest he somehow alarm her or turn her off, Joffrey began to lightly rub the area around her velocigina, is what it says, with his chin, nuzzling the rough, pebble-like folds of her skin surrounding it with his tongue. The creature howled with a terrifying, primordial delight and thrust herself back against Joffrey's mouth, knocking out his front teeth and ramming his lower jaw deep inside her. Joffrey whispered seductively, as he continued to work his magic on her with his mouth parts, delicately teasing her harsh sandpaper-like clitoris as he did so. That's actually written in here. Oh, Christ. From his vantage point on top of the cage, Muldoon could see that things were progressing far better than he ever could have hoped for. "You there!" he shouted at the engineer again, who had returned with the equipment he had been asked to retrieve. "Get up there and set up that video camera! The rest of you, find some bloody tasers!" The velociraptor continued to bellow and howl and echo her savage predatorial joy across the construction site as Joffrey brought her halfway to climax. With one exaggerated movement, she threw her hips violently to one side, dislodging Joffrey's lower jaw from her deep, hot minge, and hammering him against the side of the cage. Winded, he collapsed to the floor, his face a brutal-looking mess of blood, bone, flesh, dinosaur sex pheromones, and primeval vaginal juices. The velociraptor was a merciless predator, but she was not a selfish lover. It was time to reciprocate. As Joffrey lay battered on the cage floor, barely able to move, she approached him and lightly rested her perfectly shaped foot on his crotch. Even through his dislocated muscles... Wait, what? She could feel that bulge. She grinned, as all velociraptors are pretty much forced to do because of their bone structure, and with one deft flick of her curved toe claw, she tore through the lining of his pants and exposed his engorged, throbbing member. Joffrey mumbled with ecstasy through his maimed features as the creature appraised him. She was mildly disappointed at the lack of insemination barbs on his manhood. But she had come too far now, invested too much time, to stop the process this close to completion. Wrapping her tail around his waist, she pulled him to his feet and slammed herself back against his erect cock, moaning wickedly as it pushed apart the sides of her opening and entered her. Little bubbles of pleasure formed in the red-black foam on Joffrey's mouth as she forced herself further back, taking him deep inside her. On top of the cage, the camera was nearly ready. Muldoon could take no more. Whipping off his safari shorts and pulling out his very own big game, he wrapped his hands around it and began to rhythmically jerk off as the confused and terrified engineer pointed the camera where he was told to. "Oh, that's right. Get it all on tape. All on tape," he groaned as he energetically pumped his purple shotgun. The velociraptor was grinding and bucking against Joffrey with terrifying savagery now, and she could feel the warmth beginning to build up in her nether regions as his rock-hard dick slammed in and out of her orifice. Fervently, she rocked against the side of the cage, ignoring Joffrey's impassioned gurgling noises as she brought herself closer and closer to a meteoric climax. Meteor jokes, love it. "Keep shooting!" Muldoon moaned as he prepared to do some shooting of his own. "Shoot her! Shoot her!" Okay. That says okay. I don't know what that is. Finally, the raptor could take it no more, squealing as if she intended to drown out all other sounds that had ever been made by anything in the history of ever. She came hard and fast, her vaginal walls constricting around Joffrey, like a vice as wave after wave of putrid velociraptor love tabasco squirted everywhere, dousing the floor and walls of the cage in a layer of horribleness half an inch thick. Joffrey screamed in agony as his frail, warm-blooded member was crushed by this merciless barrage and tried desperately to pull out of her, but it was too late. In a final act of climax, she spun around again, taking him with her and cracking his spine in two. Acting on pure instinct, she sank her powerful jaws into the sides of his skull and bit down hard, ripping his head clean in half and scattering flesh and blood everywhere. As her teeth entered his brain, they triggered his pleasure and pain senses, sending him at once into the most disturbingly intense agony a human being can possibly experience, and bringing him to such heights of ecstasy as humankind can only dream of. Then he died. As she wolfed down what had once been the greater part of a young man's head, her body was racked by more uncontrollable spasms. She writhed and flopped over the cage, all movement out of her control, as the by now rallied workers fired taser shot after taser shot through the cage door, each one making contact with her and sending powerful electric shocks through her body, a sound not dissimilar to that of a former Kenyan gamekeeper ejaculating emanated from the cage roof above. And as she spasmed on the floor, she could feel a sticky, warm liquid trickle onto her from above. "Oh, yes, she should all be destroyed!" Muldoon groaned to himself as he shot his load through the hole in the cage roof and sank happily to his knees. As the workers continued to shock the velociraptor into submission, a low rumbling noise was heard. "Oh, jolly good," Muldoon thought to himself. "Sounds like the others are on their way." Excitedly, he pulled his shorts back up and rallied the remaining workforce. "Come on, you lot," he declared. "One down, 7 more to go."
Oh, yeah.
And that's how the story ends. That was fantastic.
He
And
got full release.
it was written with a little bit of self-awareness, I feel like. Self-awareness that was not found in the Cars erotica.
That guy didn't even know how cars worked.
But this guy knows full well how velociraptors work.
Yeah, those glands
Swiftly.
were not preserved by the fossils because they were too soft.
Oh, God. Dude. The fact is, dinosaurs are very sexy.